Welcome to part 2 of the episode. If you've just joined us, we've left part 1 in the description below. So head down there, click on that, give it a watch, and then come back here. Other than that, enjoy the episode.
Devon, are you familiar with the Game of Life?
The Game of Life
The board game.
is a board game, yeah. I was about to say. I was like, I'm sure I've seen that. A streamer or two playing that. Or at least the digital version of the game.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a board game before.
But how familiar are you? Have you just watched it? Have you played it yourself?
Haven't played it. I've watched it. It seems pretty fun. You kind of just, move your player piece along kind of a Monopoly-esque board until you reach the end, right?
Yes.
And you pick up like certain life skills and assets and debts along the way, and literally life happens while you're going.
Basically.
It looks pretty fun.
So when I was thinking of this topic, which to reiterate is, degree or disagree, how to win at the Game of Life, I thought about the board game. And
Okay.
for those who don't know, as you said, the Game of Life is essentially a board game version that simulates a life of an individual. You get to decide whether you go to university or don't. You can get married, you can have kids, and as you go along the board, certain events happen to you. Suddenly you own a cat, and by the end of it, you tally up your score, which is mainly about how many properties you own, how much money you have, and things like that. But in the Game of Life, at least in the 1991 edition, which is the first form of the board game as we know it now, there was a very crucial decision that you had to make in the very early stages of the game, which was to either get a degree or begin working immediately. And I feel like at the time and today, that's a very important decision that young people are faced with. And yeah, to spend time earning a degree that would potentially land you a job at a company that, if we're in this kind of 1991 headspace, you would likely work at until you retired. Or you could choose to not do a degree and begin working in a trade or a job where a degree wasn't required. Contrasting that to today, I think it's fair to say that the job market as we know it and what's required of you to get a job has starkly changed compared to that time 30 years ago. And that's a little bit of the thesis statement of what I'll be bringing to today. How jobs and the education qualifications that you need to get them have changed since the very first version of A Game of Life was released in 1991. And
Okay, so we're contrasting 1991 to today.
a little bit, yeah. And at the end of it, I kind of want to bring a new perspective on to the Game of Life. If we were to remake this board game with the kind of latest modern education and job kind of markets as they are now, what would we add to it? What would we remove from it? Things like that. But before we begin and chat about education, I think it's important to look at how the job market has changed since 1991. Because I think that a lot of the education options that people can choose from nowadays have developed directly in response to how employees, or employers rather, are looking in the job market for new employees. So how has the job market changed since 1991? I think by far the biggest change that I've seen is the digitalization of jobs, thanks to the evolution of technology. Whereas before, you might have learnt about jobs through newspapers, television ads, or even word of mouth. Today, I can go onto LinkedIn and apply for jobs not only just in my area, but the entire world, which is insane. Because I can communicate with those people and work and send my work to them using technology, even if these people are halfway around the world.
I didn't even realize how insane of a thought that is.
Right?
You never used to be able to apply for jobs, through normally for like everywhere in the world.
Like
It's
today,
actually crazy.
people in South Africa, for example, I've seen jobs in my kind of sector, which is marketing, being offered from places like America, the UK, all these affluent nations that are looking kind of in a more broader sense for cheaper labor. Whereas in South Africa, taking that job would still give you a higher income than if you had applied to jobs in your area, which is a really interesting topic. But in addition to jobs that are, more digitally available, I think jobs today require more skills, mostly digital ones, than ever before. And I think there's an incentive to learn these skills as well for employees. According to the National Skill Coalition, workers that qualify for jobs that require at least one digital skill make an average of 23% more than a job that required none. And that jumps up to 45% if a job requires at least 3 digital skills.
Wow.
What a digital skill is basically constitutes like things like Excel and other software that you can, do on your laptop or otherwise, which more often than not doesn't really need a degree to learn or master. And I think
Do I have 3 digital skills?
I
I know Excel, like I'm pretty competent. What else was like emails? I don't know if I have 3 that I could like handily put on my CV.
genuinely, I think that with how at least our generation is, serially online, there's probably 3 digital skills that you have in your arsenal that you just haven't thought about. Some of them are
I think,
probably basic
yeah.
things.
It's so normalized
Yes.
for our digitized generation that I can't even list it. It's like, what? I can record a podcast. Like, what are you talking about? It's just download the
Exactly.
software, hit the record button, and it's like, oh my god, yeah. I was gonna say I've been trying to sync my mum's new phone with her old one, and like, it's very clear that the older generation needs a bit of help every now and then.
Yeah.
And she listens to this podcast, she's gonna be so mad at me. Anyway, love you, Mom.
You can put that on your CV and potentially get a 23% increase in the next job that you have by this definition. As I think there's this more open platform for people to study and learn digital skills not through a tertiary education, it opens up the job market quite substantially. And as it seems, the requirements for digital skills and otherwise are a major factor as employees and employers start weighing these skills and gaining experience on the job, potentially against actually getting a qualification or a degree. Whereas before, a degree might have been seen as the utmost thing that you can do in 1991. To get a job, I think in the modern setting, learning skills, preferably digital ones, and also gaining experience is more and more seen as comparable in at least certain sectors. And anecdotally, I've seen this on sites like LinkedIn, for at least marketing jobs in particular, where they'll list a bunch of skills that you are required to have, but not really, but definitely less so than you'd expect. You'll see a requirement for a relevant marketing degree or a relevant tertiary degree along with it. And while that might be scary to those of you who are getting a degree currently, I think it's a pretty good thing, since the relatively high price of a university education in most countries, and as we've spoken about, in cripplingly so in America, allows people who don't have that typical running start in life to be allowed various opportunities based on the skills that they've developed by themselves rather than kind of what their parents earned or what environment they've grown up financially, which is a pretty fantastic thing. And just to put it out there, I'm not saying that studying a degree is useless. I think there are certain jobs out there that you can't just get with skills and experience alone. No one's going to trust a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or an actuary unless they have the proper degree, proper qualifications, in addition to experience from an established institution. But I do think that almost in response to the fact that employers are weighing skills and experience, at least comparably more so than they did previously, in line with degrees, we're seeing a boost in education alternatives. And that's evident in the fact that you're studying a honors degree and I'll be studying a diploma. Things like part-time, online degrees, diplomas, and other options where you can study and have a more expedited timeline. You're not wasting, 4 to 3 years and weighing that opportunity cost. You can actually study for between 6 months and 2 years instead and gain a qualification in a specific niche that you're looking to work in. And who could blame them, to be honest, for looking for shorter time spanned qualifications? I think not only are most jobs more skill-based than they were before, but the jobs that are available are changing more quickly. I think we kind of mentioned previously, the job market probably isn't changing too much within a 3 to 4 year time span, but I think it's changing a lot more quickly than it was before. I mean, even last year with the introduction of AI, we've seen, we'll see in kind of the test of time whether certain jobs like, AI engineer or AI prompt engineer will be a thing in the next few years. But those opportunities will be missed if you are, studying a 3 to 4 year degree in a separate industry that might not be as relevant with the introduction of newer and newer technology.
I want to say that, sorry, Vince, I want to say that, like, AI is an outlier, but then, like, is blockchain an outlier? Was, crypto an outlier? Was, I don't know, I can't think of, I haven't been in the job market that long, but, like, I feel like there's been an uptick in outliers, kind of in the 21st century.
Yeah.
So I agree with your rate of change argument. I think there's a trend.
Even say the job that I'm in now, which is to do with copywriting and marketing, had like a major uptick compared to maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Just because not only is like prevalence online and like online digital stores more of a thing, but that kind of competition to get your business or your service on Google has only really become a major factor recently. And so I think there's a lot of industries out there that are booming and like being introduced to the industry quite a lot more quickly than before, which to some people who are planning to study might seem like a big part of that opportunity cost. They're going to be missing out on potentially booming sectors if they're committing to a degree that might not be as relevant in a couple years' time. Not irrelevant, but maybe not as relevant, which impacts things like wages and, all sorts of competition factors and things like that.
Yeah, that's scary, huh?
A little bit. But yeah, in light of all this, I thought about what I would change in the game of life to represent today's economic conditions. And as you might guess, one of the few things that I would add are alternative degree options. In the game of life, you're kind of prompted to go with a degree or to just start working fairly early on in the board game. But if you had the option to, do a diploma or a short degree, where you wouldn't incur as much debt, or potentially even have options to take online courses, or even just pick up a degree later in life, as people tend to do, and kind of curb that plateau where, you start working and end up kind of reaching a certain limit. You can boost that by just getting an education later in life. We've also barely spoken about the gig economy and how people are now taking gigs along with their jobs, which is a topic we've covered before slightly, but is a new addition to the job market that wasn't in that original board game, which I think would be a cool, thing to add on. Also, the option to hop between jobs through your life. I think nowadays it's a lot more popular to get a job and in 3 or 4 years change what you're doing, either in the position or the company. But I think long gone are the days where you would get a job and if all goes well, you would stay at that job, slowly getting, along in your career until you retire. I think people are a lot more flexible, and that kind of incentive to have shorter degrees to kind of match the new job market that you're trying to hop into is a lot more appetizing. And the last thing, as we've kind of spoken about briefly, is to introduce global career opportunities, or scenarios that involve people, working or living abroad. There are more recent versions of the Game of Life that introduce things like this, but I think it's difficult with how quickly things are ramping up and changing to get a, brand new version of the game. But if I were to make it, I'd probably add these things to it. And yeah, to cap things off, I'm kind of curious. We are both studying this year. You're doing a full honors degree, and I'm doing a postgraduate diploma. In light of what you've researched and what I've mentioned in this episode, and just the discussion that we've had so far, why have you decided to go with what you're studying? Why have you decided to study further?
That's a great question. I don't actually have the biggest answer to it. I have the funds, which helps. It's not necessarily the reason, but it helps. I really enjoy economics. In fact, I do a podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it. A few of my family members are in academia, which is a viable route for economics, which has gotten me interested. And I kind of just want to see how far this passion could go. I also just want to learn. I know that economics in particular, out of all the financy, courses and that out there, is kind of the least market applicable.
Sure.
In terms of the number of jobs you can get. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the reason why I didn't consider doing it before. But I think I'm at a stage in my life where I think it's a good option. But I think if I didn't have the funds, it would be very different. So yeah, that's my answer. I don't know if that's a yes or a no. You decide.
Sure. I think in some ways we kind of contrast each other in the decision making and maybe represent the two different groups on why to get a education, or at least contrasting degrees and alternative career options like diplomas and online courses. Because from my side, I'm planning to get the diploma because it's almost like prep for a path that I want to take. Currently I'm doing marketing and SEO and things like that, and the postgraduate diploma is management for marketing. So my kind of theorem is that, down the line, instead of being, a writer or someone who just does SEO, it'd be cool to kind of move up the corporate ladder and be a manager or kind of more high-end position within that space. Obviously, we're both speaking from positions where we can actually afford the postgraduate educations. But I think if you're looking at that kind of bubble, we're probably representing the two sides of why someone would go into that education, which is quite interesting to me. And dear listeners, if you have, a different reason why you're going into postgraduate education, or even a reason why you think you won't go, or reasons why people shouldn't go, please do leave them in the comments below, because I'm very interested on topic, and it's kind of fascinating to think about anyway. But yeah, any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
I was just going to say, I think the social pressure for degrees is so heavy that even when you were mentioning how there should be a different option in the game of life, specifically short courses, and I've done a short course before in marketing, I was like, is that legitimate? You've made such a logical argument, you've presented it so well, and I, in my head, agree with you. But in the same time, I'm like, damn, maybe it's got me, is that is that a legitimate route? And like, oh, it's so frustrating. I can see how this is such a frustrating topic for so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think-
that's my closing thoughts.
If you don't experience it yourself, it is like, even for me, it's difficult to imagine. Because, yeah, everyone has the perception perhaps of like short courses, oh, you just do it and then what? How is that like useful? But I think combined with skills and experience, it's not like a for sure thing, which I think even degrees are not for sure things in most cases, but it's kind of a complement that you can do. Whereas skills and experience might be the more important thing, which are a little bit more loosey-goosey to think about and imagine when you're thinking about jobs and getting jobs.
Fair.
But yeah, please do let us know your thoughts. And while you're there, please hit that like button and perhaps a subscribe or a 5-star review. It really helps us out. And let us know what you want to hear about next. What do you want us to research and bring forth, perhaps from a new perspective? We're always looking for new topics. But until then, I've been Vince.
And I've been Devon.
And please, we'll see you next time.